So I was just referring to the fact that standards are there because of needs. The one needs is that when it becomes to a more industrialized type of service, whatever it is, think about the cars where the standards came along with the industrialization of the car manufacturing. We are almost in the same situation now where cloud becomes a factor of industrialization. Or IT becomes a factor of industrialization, and those standards are needed. The other point is that from a customer perspective, things need, all elements need to be covered which are relevant to a customer, and this also requires a certain set of standards. So that is at least our view, and now please feel free to raise your questions.
So, good morning from my side to the audience. My name is Andreas Weiss. I've been asked to be the moderator for this short session. Probably you have some questions, but before we start, I would like to ask a simple question to Margot. Can you precise the term standards? Because I think it is a very wide area. We can talk about technology standards, about management standards, about law, probably just to understand the scope of your initiative.
Yeah. You want? How much time do I have? No, what I think will be interesting in this initiative, you're right, we need to be very specific because there will be standard at the network level, then in the middleware, and then business processes, etc., which is precisely because the reason why we're going to work with other standard organizations whose core business is in those areas in order to have a consistent roadmap in support of the EC objectives. For example, it's very likely that with the SLAs and business processes and things like that, we will involve organizations such as the Telemanagement Forum and all these things in order to produce those roadmap. No organization will do it alone, that's for sure, because they will need for what I call hard standards, network, access, and all these things, middleware standards, business processes on top. So yes, you're right, it's very wide. I'd like to just come back on Bernd's introduction, because you're right, it's industrialization, and the analogy with the car industry is interesting. There is one difference with the cloud, is that you have car manufacturers which are which are so big as of today that they can set their own standard at their own condition, which probably was not the case at the beginning, except for Mr. Ford. So this is the crux of the matter.
Okay. Now, the other question I have probably is where do we see the border between what needs to be standardized and where do we need openness? Because we're talking about a new cloud ecosystem, and of course there's a lot of innovation. We just made the award for a lot of startups who are in the area of cloud computing and who are developing new business models, which might require also some standardization. Bernd, what is your idea about the cloud ecosystem, and where do we need openness and where do we need some guidance?
Well, perhaps we should take into account the European market when we are talking about Europe, and we are talking about Europe. And the ecosystem here in Europe is very much small media enterprise. And once we talk about standards, those standards need to be affordable for the small media enterprises. If we have standards of highest quality but highest prices, they may be not being able for adoption to those small media enterprises. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Okay. Tobias, you've been working closely with the Austrian Standardization Institute about service level agreements and quality criteria. Can you share some ideas or give us some feedback about the level of discussion? Where is it difficult and where is it quite easy to get some progress?
Yes, of course. First of all, Margot, in your speech you said you are counting on our support for this quite heavy fight that you're expecting, you will have our support, of course. In Austria, the Chamber of Commerce came up to us and asked us, or told us that, I mean, the ecosystem in Austria is even a lot smaller sized companies than in Europe. So we have specific problems for small companies. And they told us, please give us at least a little framework of how we can do cloud business, how our cloud suppliers should do their contracts, and how companies can use cloud business right now, because we have just nothing. There is no ISO standard that we can use. There is no common framework like in the car industry that we can use. So we started on a very basic level, just setting up a list of things you should have in a catalog, or in a contract between a cloud supplier and a cloud user, so that everybody knows what he should talk about. We did not talk about how you should regulate things. We just said, for example, you should talk about where is the data center of your cloud service. And we did not say that it has to be in Europe, or it has to be global, or it has to be high security. We just said, please, in your contract, talk at least about where is that, so that everybody just has a list, a guideline, and can hand over from, it's about 50 bullet points, and can go from one point to the other and not forget one of these important things, because you have compliance issues in every company, even in the small ones, and that can be costly if you do too many mistakes.
Any question from the audience about this topic? Yeah, Paul.
Hello, my name is Paulo from EuroCloud Portugal. My question is for Margot Dor. Being ETSI a worldwide organization, and sometimes the European Commission is being criticized for pushing too hard this standardization movement. Okay, we know that American companies, for instance, are doing a lot of business in cloud, and we are also hearing a lot that the European companies are not being able to do business because we don't have standards, we don't have standardized markets. So my question is, what is your view about these worldwide movements on standardization? Are Europe going in the right direction, or are Europe pushing too hard these movements?
You're asking me if Europe is legitimate to want to try and draft its own standard roadmap? Okay, in the United States, the U.S. government, the federal government, has made something which is called a Cloud First policy. I'm here speaking under the control of American citizens, but I think it's called Cloud First. It was under the early years of Obama 1. They tasked the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, to try and drive these roadmaps of standardization. So they are also pushing extremely hard in order to have a set of standards, in particular for the federal government and federal agencies to use, and we are cooperating with them. We go to many of their meetings in Washington, D.C. Actually, Ken was last night leaving because he was going to Washington, D.C. to the next thing of what is called in NIST the SAGAC, Standards Acceleration. I cannot remember what the acronym stands for, but they are very, very, very active. In Japan, there is something which is empowered by the Japanese government in MIC, so the Ministry of Industry and Communication, I think. And we set up also its own standards roadmap, standards initiative, etc. In China, which we are blessed working with, there is also something called the national strategy with all these so-called indigenous innovation. By the way, it makes us incumbent in the standards production market sometimes shiver, but I don't see why the Chinese shouldn't be doing what we've been doing for the last 200 years. That's my own view. So they obviously have a policy which is extremely, extremely aggressive and not always as open as Europe would like it to be. That's an understatement. And we surmise, and we're starting a similar project with India, which recently created a standard organization, because in India the standards are led in BIS, which had very little work on ICT so far, but they created a new standard organization as of actually 2 weeks ago called DOSTI. And on top of the agenda, guess what? There is cloud. So this is extremely interesting because what's happening is that all these companies that are here, I see HP is one, but others are, and we, as a matter of consequence, all the industry players and global players want global standards because that's life on life terms. And yet, all regions and sometimes all countries in Europe, 27, have different requirements, and in domains that are extremely regulated as the cloud because of the data protection, etc., you have this tension between the two. So this is one of the tricky things to play with, and you have to cater to these two things which are in tension. So no, we're not pushing too much. We are definitely not pushing too much because we'd be crazy not to be the only region not to have a strategy, a vision, and an implementation plan. And by the way, and I'm going to give you, it's a Margot comment, it's not an ETSI comment. Standards are absolutely not neutral. It's never the question of the best technical solution, otherwise we would have watched Betamax for a number of years. So let's not be too naive also about this whole thing.
Okay. Thank you, Margot. Tobias?
Paolo, I would also like to answer to your question, is Europe pushing too hard? I think the European Commission is doing exactly what we expect our European Commission to do, and we are not pushing, we are running behind. We are doing $1 billion business every month in the cloud industry already, and we don't have a standard. And as Vivian Redding said yesterday, we need a market for cloud business, and the currency is data. And we need a free flow, but under controlled framework for this market of data. So we need technical and legal standards that make it a lot easier in Europe and also globally to sell or to buy cloud services. I think we all have quite a big difficulty to be on the market as a European player.
And I would like to add one.
What I think is very important is the way we communicate with the market, especially because our European market is very focused on SMEs, and sometimes they don't understand that this is really important in order to help the market move forward. And this big picture about what is happening in the world is very important for everyone in order to understand that we are not the only ones that are pushing this too hard. Other countries are doing the same, because we need to also to be an active player in the worldwide worldwide cloud market.
I would agree on that, because in an ideal world we would have a global regulation which fits everywhere. But I think there is quite a way to go. And we are currently in a situation that we have regulations on national basis, whatever it is, legal aspects as well as other regulations, data security regulations, for example. And to come from a state to a global solution would mean there are other continents in between, and that's why we feel that it is the right strategy to consolidate throughout Europe before we then do the next step and look for the global one. The other point is, as already said before, yes, there are the global players, and we are all depending on the global players. Without the global players, we wouldn't have the cloud. That has to be clear. And of course, global players follow a global strategy. It's clear as well. But they want to do business in all continents of the globe. Therefore, they want to do the business here in Europe as well. We have to see that the ecosystem always has a dependency between the big ones and the small ones. The smalls need this. The big companies need small companies because of their innovations, because of their force, because of their, let's say, higher dynamic. And they are relying on that. On the other opposite, the small companies are relying on the big players because they are the platform providers. So there is a dependency in between. And that will also be, needs to be taken into account when it comes to standards.
Okay, we are running out of time, so just one final question.
Thanks. This is Sierk Maker from Comprex in Germany. My questions are two. The first one is about the openness. The highest risk for our customers is risk of vendor lock-in, and they want to have the openness, a standardized infrastructure for storage server and hypervisor, not even for management, but for all the other three. And they ask us, what will we do? Because the vendors, maybe everyone wants to sell their proprietary environment and want to make this lock-in. What will happen now? And I think this is very necessary to do to give the right direction for openness, even if you want to standardize. This is not the opposite openness of standardization. And my wish for you is when you work that you work together with the other ones like ODCA or Tosca. I think 2 weeks ago ODCA announces what they call it proposal engine assistant tool, where all interesting companies can fill out a proposal for cloud. And we, as a system integrator, have to use it to build a proposal, to build a tender on ODCA standards. But this is proprietary too, because this is just ODCA based on several companies.
Thank you for this. ODCA is on board. I don't know what the status of this particular deliverable they have is, but ODCA is not proprietary. It's an association of users, whose technical advisor is Intel, which is at the board of ETSI. So they are on board, etc. I will check, but definitely the whole idea is to make sure that the relevant organizations, be they standard organization or requirement definition or for or consortia, etc., are on board. It'll be as good as this, but you're more than welcome to participate yourself. Thanks.